Before Henry went to Honolulu, he asked me to come and share with you. I didn't know it at the time, but my wife had set me up. Yeah, it's nice when your wife sets you up. She set me up to go to a seminar. I don't usually go to seminars. I usually like to stay at home and read books, because some of us learn best with others, and others of us, well, we like to stay at home and read books. The seminar was on youth and technology. Not my most favorite topic, one that I speak on quite a bit. This guy knew a whole lot more than I knew. What shocked me was he quoted a statistic from Stanford University down in California that said the generation that now holds their cell phone is 40% less able to care for the generation that didn't hold their cell phone. They just don't know how to be affectionate. And I thought that's shocking. It's shocking because what he calls affection, I call love. And he was talking about how our world has changed. We used to be primarily attached to people older than ourselves. Our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, our aunts. Our primary attachment has changed from people who are older to people who are the same age as ourselves, our peers. Worshiping with you this morning is it's always wonderful, but it's a little unusual for me because you're my peers. You see me every other Sunday, I'm worshiping this way. When I'm worshiping with children, they are not my peers. They look at me and they go, Pastor Sam, he's old. Okay, because I'm somebody's father. I am old. I have a beard at times. I have a little less at other times. But here, when I worship with you, I worship with my peers, and I have to confess, I'm not always used to that. But since probably about the mid-'80s, we have emphasized our peer relationships, and so through the 90s and some of our technological tools, we have learned to maximize peer relationships. And then Facebook happened, and it just became maximized to infinity and beyond, because right now you could be giving someone an update at what you're doing, and you could be Facebooking Pastor Sam, still on introduction, let you know how it goes. Our relationships are vitally important. They're vitally important in Scripture as well. Let me read for you from 1 Samuel chapter 17. And I'm going to read a bit of chapter 18 as well. This is just after David has slain Goliath. So my other congregations, their favorite story is just finished. And then we begin in verse 55 of chapter 17. As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? Abner said, as your soul lives, O king, I do not know. The king said, inquire whose son the boy is. And as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. Now in chapter 18, verse 1. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul, and Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David. and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war, and this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. The book of 1 Samuel is a book of relationships. You see, the book starts off with relationships between a husband and his two wives. Because one wife had lots of relationships because she had lots of kids. When you have lots of kids, you have lots of relationships. Maybe more than you're even comfortable with at times. The other wife has very few relationships. She has a relationship with her husband, who loves her dearly. And then she has a relationship with her co-wife. And we move from that into the life of Samuel and his relationships, into Saul and his relationships, and then we come to David. And David is a man rich in relationships. Many wives, many children, many commanders, many friends. Up to this point, David has been mainly at home. I say mainly because even though Saul doesn't know who he is, he's met David before. If you flip back to chapter 16, you find David's the guy on the side playing the harp for Saul to calm Saul down because Saul has emotional distress. Saul has an evil spirit that comes to him at times, and David, he's got jive or something, but he plays music, Saul calms down, and Saul loves him, it says. And he made him his armor bearer. And yet Saul doesn't know who he is. He's like, Abner, who's this guy? Abner's like, I don't know. David, who's been on the side, play the music. It's good. You're calm. You're sane. David's the one that Saul has to thank for his sanity, and yet he doesn't know who he is because Saul's a collector. Some people with their relationships collect relationships. You know who these people are. They have 863 friends on Facebook. Nobody has that many friends. Unless you go out and you collect them. Okay, some people used to collect stamps. Okay, it was the most boring hobby back in the day. If you collect stamps, I'm so sorry. It's still boring. Okay, but all those stamp collectors gave up stamp collecting when Facebook came because now you don't have to collect stamps. Stamps don't have to be your friends. Friends can be your friends. All you have to do is click. Got another one. Put them in. Got another. And you just kind of maintain them. It's like going through those binders I used to have and making sure they're all nice and in good condition. They don't get any mold. You do the same things to your friends on Facebook. Okay? You collect them. Saul is a collector. And the first thing he does is he collects David. He's a man who has many tools. He doesn't know what to do with them all, but he needs more. He has many friends. He doesn't know what to do with David yet, but he needs more. And so even before David kills the Philistine, Goliath doesn't even get a name anymore. He's just the Philistine, the guy. He's no longer referred to in his height. He's just the guy. David hasn't even won yet. And Saul's like, who's that guy? I might like to collect that one and put him in my little bag. Never know when you need a friend. That's one kind of friend. Abner's another kind of friend. Abner is the user. He doesn't want to just collect you because Abner doesn't have time to collect large amounts of friends. Abner is a man on a mission. Abner is Saul's captain. Saul, he's the king. He hasn't got time to look after all the details. He's the owner of the company. Abner is the manager. Managers have the worst job because they're the guy in the middle. The owners want stuff to happen. The people who do all the work rather not quite so much happen because they're tired. It's Monday. Leave me alone. Give me my coffee. Abner's in the middle. Abner needs useful people. he doesn't really care for David. He sees him. He's successful. That I like. Does he know David's personality? Does he know the name of Abner's third-born sheep in his flock? Probably not. But he knows David is a guy who can get things done. And so very quickly, Abner comes to David and says, I need you. You're my man. You are successful. He doesn't have to necessarily know who he is. He just knows he wants him on his team. This is going to date me, but back when Gretzky was traded to LA, no one in LA knew who Wayne Gretzky was. What they knew was he wins games. And now I listen to the radio and I hear these trades and these hockey teams, and I'm like, I have no idea who that is. All people care about is do they win games? And there is a time and a place to get things done. And so this is an important thing to get done, to have people on your team that you know you can depend upon that are going to be successful. The last person that David suddenly gets introduced to is Jonathan. Jonathan is not his father. His father goes for a march because he has to. Abner went on the march because he's got to get something done. Jonathan goes on the march, and he's the guy who's like tasting honey on the way. Ooh, looks tasty. And he stops, and he smells the rose. As he's tasting the honey, he's getting into trouble. He's also taking on entire garrisons of Philistines because he believes God is with him. Jonathan is a completely different kind of relationship. But it begins in the most natural way. They have a shared occupation. They're co-workers. What's your job? I kill people. Me too. Guess that means we're co-workers. They both became soldiers. And when we share activities with people, we build relationships with people. And you think about it. You have playmates. You go to kindergarten and you play with someone and he's your friend. Okay? They might even become your best friend. You might play with them all the time. Every time you go to the block station, they're there. And I like the blocks. All right, you're good because you like the blocks too. We're friends. We're best friends forever. No matter what. Nothing will come between us. And then you grow up, you're like, oh, do you know what? I'm so much more mature than that. And you play basketball. And he plays basketball. And you're best friends forever. And you're schoolmates. And you become friends. The things we do bind us together. In Acts chapter 1, verse 21, the church is gathered together. And they have to replace Judas. Who do they replace Judas with? Someone who's been with us the whole time. Someone who's shared our activities, shared our experiences. They're the ones that we have that relationship with. And we want to invite someone who has that shared experience in with us. These relationships are important. Augustine writes of a friend he had when he was in school. And in school we formed some very deep relationships. And he writes, after his friend dies, and so he writes, "For I felt that my soul and his soul were but one soul in two bodies. Consequently, my life was now a horror to me, because I did not want to live as a half-self. But it may have been that I was afraid to die, lest he should then die wholly, whom I had so greatly loved." They were schoolmates. There's a reason we often start seriously dating in university. We have a shared experience, a shared situation. and we get close. And so David and Jonathan share that experience as David recounts what happened between him and the Philistine. It starts to sound to Jonathan like, that's what happened when I went up a hill with my armor bearer and thought, will God give me victory? I'm going to trust him with it. Both battles were uphill. Both battles were against the odds. They had a shared activity, a shared occupation. Now they're both soldiers. And yet it goes beyond that. And Jonathan and David knit their souls together. Seems like an odd occupation for soldiers to have, knitting. But I suppose it's calming. As they weave their lives through one another. It's much more than just people you know at work and you're like, see you Monday, see you Monday. What shift are you on? Not the good one. Okay. No, they take it much further. They take it much further than going out for supper after work and spending time with each other. They share their hearts. They knit their souls together. They break their souls open and then weave them together. So it starts to sound a little bit like Augustine and his friend, where they feel like it's, where does he end and I begin? Or if you say, when I was a teenager, we used to say, we're tight. Yeah, we're tight. They're knitted. And that means you open up your mind, you open up your heart. And these are dangerous relationships to have. Because when you start to share between each other, you're so open, you become very vulnerable. And sometimes that can be a very bad thing. Sometimes it can be a wonderful thing. All through my 20s, I had no interest in evangelism. But I worked with someone. And I got to know someone. And we started to open up, we started to share. And he was an evangelist. And now I get so excited for the summer because we do VBS, we do DC, and we gear up for Awana, and we evangelize children. We evangelize parents. Things get shared. It's really hard to protect yourself from all the good things that come across when you're knitted together. Jonathan loves him as his own soul. This goes further than just being tight. There is a dynamic in here, in this relationship, that sees them through so many things. Initially, it sees them through a lot of good times. God blesses David and Jonathan. They're both successful campaigners for Saul. They're both really, really easy to get along with Abner. Because Abner just loves these two guys. Everywhere they go, win. It's nice when you have a win. It's nice when you have a win and a win. Abner had a win-win situation. No matter which way they went, these guys won. And he loved that. And they could share. And they could celebrate one another's victories. At the same time, Jonathan can see in David a faith that is like his own. And David's younger. Jonathan has been at this for a while. That's why he has the sword and the robe and the belt and the bow. He has all this equipment. David is a little bit younger, and Jonathan sees a faith like his own with potential. And when you see potential, you're never sure exactly how far, well, sometimes we say it like this, you're never sure how far this horse is going to run. He's got all four legs, some good muscle tone. How much distance am I going to get out of him? You don't know. The only way to really know is to get on and go for a ride. And so Jonathan gets on and goes for a ride. And he finds that faith that kind of resonates in him. And he sees David, and this boy's got some legs. This horse can run. Paul does the same thing with the Philippians. In chapter 4, verse 9, finally, brothers, I'm starting in verse 8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Jonathan's not the only one who gives up equipment. Swords were not easy to come by. When Abner sent David out, yeah, you're my new greatest warrior, out you go, there were no blacksmiths in Israel. They had to go over into the enemy camp just to get their axe sharpened to cut firewood. David's going off completely unprepared. Jonathan sees potential, and so he feeds it. Because he knows what David's going to be going up against. He knows what David has in store. And so he gives him all this equipment, and he equips him the same way Paul equips the believers in Philippi, the same way he equipped believers in Galatia and Ephesus, Colossia, the same way he equips us. And David and Jonathan were fellow worshipers. Both of them understood intrinsically that even though Saul was sitting on the throne, God was still the king of Israel. And so David and Jonathan did not have to self-promote. They could serve. And they could rejoice in each other. And they can see the beauty in one another. And so Jesus tells his disciples, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." The hard times would come for this friendship. There would be times when sacrifices would be made. And yet the relationship, the friendship is able to grow and to thrive and to celebrate each other, because their focus is not on each other. It doesn't end in two guys who really appreciate and befriend one another. Because the whole world is made up of us and them. You drive down the street yesterday through Edmonton, the sun is shining, except for those brief, sudden, out-of-nowhere showers, and you will see the people who do lawn work and the people who don't do lawn work. And you may be one of those people, or you may be one of those. They may be. Are you us, or are you them? We divide ourselves. The tragedy in Bangladesh happened because there are those who own companies and make money, and then there's them who serve and work in the company. And there's a division between them where those who are in charge and those who work don't have a relationship. What happened in Boston is because there's us and there's them. And us and them can be a somewhat latent term. It doesn't have to always be centered around violence or tragedy. For David and Jonathan, there was us who serve God, who serve the armies of Israel, and then there's them, the Philistines. And Jesus tells us how to deal with our enemies when our enemies are them. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 to 48, tells us, love them. If they want something, let them have it. They want to hit you, let them have it. They want your money, let them have it. Love them. And when they're not our enemies, when they're people who are in our midst, around us, people we care about. When we are the Jonathans and we see someone who is younger, who has potential, we need to love them. So the Apostle John, as he's writing in 1 John towards the end of his life, says this, I write to you, fathers, because you know him who is from the beginning. I write to you, young men, because you are strong, and the word of God abides in you, and you have overcome the evil one. He tells the young ones, you have overcome giants. And the next passage, he starts to elaborate. You have not only overcome giants, you are in a position to overcome the world. And Jonathan looked at David and he said, you know what, David? I'm going to knit my soul to you. I am going to be your friend. Let me walk with you. Let me equip you. Let me care for you, because you have overcome a giant and now you're going to overcome the world. The spiritual discipline of mentoring is just that. It's seeing that spark, that resonance of, I see a faith like your faith. I see in you potential. Let me walk with you. Let me do what I can to equip you, to encourage you, to be a sounding board. You can complain to me. You can bounce ideas off me. Let me spend time with you and help you grow. Because our young people are overcoming giants. And our desire for them is to overcome the world. Now, when Henry brought forward spiritual disciplines, he's brought forward prayer, and you went to your small groups and you practiced it. And you do some Bible reading, and I saw online, you're practicing it. I'm bringing before you the spiritual practice, the spiritual discipline of mentoring. And to practice it, you need a young person. You need someone whose faith resonates with yours. And you're like, well, I don't know kids. They're little. I don't resonate with little people. And yet, if you're a person of faith, you put yourself into relationships where you find you have to sound against them. Resonating has an intrinsic hitting process involved. And sometimes when you're discipling and mentoring young people, you have to do a little hitting. You have to put stuff out there. You have to put yourself out there. You may have to buy a couple cups of coffee or a pop or a thing of McNuggets. You may be in IKEA buying the $1 breakfast. Yes. But you have to put yourself out there. You have to make that movement. This morning, if you're interested in mentoring, you're happy, I am here because I can help you. Or rather, I have people who can help you because I have connections with little people. People shorter than me, people who are overcoming giants. People who are going to overcome the world. And we're going to have our mentoring workshop that we do every year with our youth groups next month. If you're interested in mentoring, talk to Clara or Ruth after service, because I would like to invite you to practice mentoring a young person. You say, well, I don't know what to do. I have no idea what to talk about with this person. That's okay. It's a workshop. I'll get you started. I can't come on every visit with you, but we'll help you get started, get the ball rolling. We'll even hook you up with a young person. It's nice to be set up. Let's pray.